I believe that Labour is the best party to deliver a better environment for our people in the UK, but also across the world. And that's why I'm proud to be co-chair of the Labour Party's environment campaign. That's why I was happy with our president, Feargal Sharkey, to do our Stop the Shit Show tour in the summer, which helped to get 103 Labour MPs elected. Now we've got an opportunity to improve our country and improve our planet. And why wouldn't you want to do that? That's the difference a Labour government makes.
Be in no doubt, we are going to get Britain building again. We are going to get Britain's economy growing again. And there is no time to waste.
Together, let us fight for a better future once again. Change begins now.
Whoever I meet, I see a team of people that are ready and willing to put their shoulder to the wheel to get it done, and their government is already at work putting our shoulders to the wheel too.
But have no doubt that the work of change begins immediately. Have no doubt that we will rebuild Britain.
So this is the first for We Are Labour. I'm now joined by Ken Penton. He's not an MP. He is, though, somebody very important in the party because he's part of SERA. And SERA is an organisation we're going to be exploring today. And I thought I'd find out all about it. And this is the best man to talk to. So, Ken, welcome to We Are Labour.
Thanks very much, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show.
Brilliant stuff. So, SERA, what is it? What does it mean? Do you want to tell us a bit about it?
Yeah, so we're the Labour Party's environment and climate affiliate. So I'll give you a little bit of our history and then I'll tell you a bit about what an affiliate is. So we are, in fact, actually, let me do it the other way around. So an affiliate. So when the Labour Party was created back in 1906, I think it was, there were actually, you had to be a trade union member. So there were affiliated trade unions, and then there were organisations like the Fabian Society. So when we say we're an affiliate, we are one of 22 socialist societies, and the Fabians is probably the most famous and long-standing one of them. And like the trade unions as well, we are part of the Labour Party, and affiliates of the socialist societies have been part of the Labour Party since its very foundation. In fact, before you could be an individual member of the Labour Party. So when the Labour Party started, it was trade unionists and socialist societies. So
I didn't realise you had to have that first, and then you become a party member. Oh.
Yes, that is the question. So there's now 22 socialist societies. The Fabian Society is the most long-standing one that people will have heard of. There's the Socialist Education Association, the Jewish Labour Movement, the Labour Housing Group.
There's Irish Society, I believe, isn't there?
Labour Party, Irish Society. So so there's a mixture of affiliates in the Socialist Societies section. There's a mixture of affiliates. Some represent particular groups in terms of characteristics and background, like Labour Party Irish or Jewish Labour or Southeast Asians for Labour, and then there are others which are more policy based, which is like the Labour Housing Group or the Socialist Education. There's scientists for Labour, for instance. So people who come from a different specific policy aspect. There's the Labour Animal Welfare Society. Now, we are the Labour Party's environment and climate affiliate, where we were founded in 1973. So last year was our 50th anniversary. When we were founded, we were called the Socialist and Environmental Resources Association. When the scientists who founded us, I'm sure, thought that was a really sexy name. The way we bill ourselves now is we bill ourselves as Labour's environment campaign, because that's what we are. We do both policy development and we do campaigning, both of which we'll probably come on to later in the podcast.
Okay, so let's go to 1973. That seems incredibly early to me because apart from the current king, It didn't seem like that's probably an issue that was discussed massively. I could be wrong, of course, but it seems to me in my lifetime that I've seen really the late 90s, the noughties, these issues were really being discussed in the public sphere. I mean, was this something that is ahead of its time, or is this a part of a movement in the academic community?
Well, a confession, first of all, I was only 3 in 1973. So, I don't have the greatest insight into that. However, we still have founding members who are alive, who I've spoken to about why it was set up. And the clue, I mean, people were concerned about the environment, about pollution. It was a big driver, also about nature. But also, and what we talk about resource, that's why resources was in the title. So about the issues of water and other natural resources and how we protect them. So I think he probably was ahead of the curve. Now, I first got involved with SERA and became aware of them. I've done a few things in my past, but I've been a Labour Party advisor a couple of times. Before 1997, I was a Labour advisor and the run up to the 97 election. First of all, I worked for Michael Meacher, who was, when I went to work for him, he was the shadow employment secretary, and I came from a sort of trade union, semi-trade union think tank background. And then he got moved, as happens in reshuffles, at Tony Blair's reshuffle before the general election in late 1996, and he became the environment secretary. And I really had little or no knowledge of the environment then. And that's when I first met Labour's environment affiliate, SERA, and the experts they've got. Because what we bring as part of it is a lot of our members are people who work in expert fields, who have a background in planning or in energy or in farming and nature and sustainability. And I met them, and in the conversations with them, I thought this is an organisation I should join. This is an organisation which cares about the environment, climate, can help inform people like me and Labour MPs and Labour politicians at all levels, frankly, about the importance of the issues, but also will help us and understand that we can't address these unless we get a Labour government.
Yeah. So, all right then. So this is really fascinating because I'll be completely honest. I didn't know a huge amount, and so I'm going to ask these questions genuinely from point of ignorance to find out more. So it's an organisation. Now, is it like a charity? Is it funded like by donations, or is it funded by the party? How does it kind of fund itself?
No, so first of all, we're a separate organisation. Like trade unions and like the other social societies, we are affiliated to the Labour Party and we're part of the movement through our affiliation. But we are not funded by the party. In fact, quite the reverse. We have to give them money every year when we affiliate.
Not surprised.
So how do we? Well, first of all, we're a membership. All affiliates have to be membership organisations. So our members pay subs. They're not huge, but if people do want to join, it's £3 a month, £36 a year if you are working. It's £2 a month, £24 a year if you're not working, and you can join up by the links on our website.
I'll put a link in the show notes too, so they can go and sign up in the show. Yeah.
Yeah. But also we're funded by events as well. So we have some members who give us more money than the membership costs. We do get donations and they're always gratefully received. But we put on a lot of events. So we're coming up, I'm not sure when this podcast is actually going to be broadcast, but we're speaking now about 4 weeks before the Labour Party conference. We will have our Labour Environment Hub venue in the Labour Party conference. We're putting on, at the moment, I think we're putting on 23 events between the Saturday of Labour Women's Conference and the Tuesday evening when we will finish up. And we have partners who work with them. We're actually, on the Labour Hub, Environment Hub, we're actually doing it in partnership this year with Ecotricity. So for any of you who are going to be watching this and then go to Labour Conference, you will see our marquee in front of the conference centre on the riverside there, with the Labour Environment Hub, our logo, and Ecotricities on it. So we fund it through partnerships with organisations, some of them commercial organisations. We also do it with charities, trade unions, etc. So that's how we fund ourselves.
Okay.
On occasion, we do explore whether we can get grants for particular projects as well. But it's mostly our main two sources of income are membership and events.
Yeah, yeah. So in that case, you then have experts, as you said, who are part of SERA, who work for the organisation, and it's a bit like a think tank. They're coming up with theories, the ideas, based on evidence and research. Is that how it works?
Yeah, well, I mean, just like the Labour Party, actually, our membership is our best resource.
Right.
Uh, yeah, and that's it. We've got. We'll come on to this, but we've got members who are MPs. Many of of I was about to say shadow cabinet. Many of the cabinet are our members. Who are experts in their own field. We've got members who aren't politicians directly, but who work in the energy sector, who work in sustainability, academics, people who specialise in specific areas. My former co-chair, Melanie, well, not Michael, but my co-chair, Lisa Trickett, who can't be with us today, were succeeded a co-chairs, one of whom, Melanie Smallman, is an academic at UCL in their energy team. So, and we've got people who are experts, say, in planning, uh, yeah, a huge amount, but also people who are just passionate about the environment and bring a bottom-up approach as well in terms of what they see in their everyday life in the community where they live. And all of these are valid and much needed.
Yeah, yeah, for sure it is. So in that case, then the affiliate organisation has these events. It has lots of ministers and also MPs. So how did you, for instance, like work with things like the manifesto? I mean, how did you feed into the conversations around the green policies, and particular things like GB Energy? Were you part of those plans as well?
Yeah, so I mean, so as I say, we're an affiliate, so that means we are constitutionally part of the Labour Party, so long as we pay our subs every year. Uh, and what entitles us to we delegate to conference, and we can propose motions to Labour Party conference, and we do, and I'll come back to that in a moment. And also, we have one of our members is also one of the Socialist Society representatives on the National Policy Forum, and we take part in the National Policy Forum process over the 4 year cycle. I wouldn't bore everyone with the details of that, but we can
Please
put in
do,
policy.
please do.
We
I'd
can
love to
put
hear
everyone.
this.
Well, we can put in policies for debate and discussion, but then at the end of the 4 year cycle, as it happened last summer, there's then a report which is produced, and then people can put in MPF members can put in uh, amendments to that, which we did, a number of them. I think we can put up to 6 amendments per.
Hmm.
We did that on a number of areas, and we had significant impact on what the National Policy Forum report, which was adopted at the conference and formed the basis for Labour's election manifesto. So, I'll give you on. So I'll go back to Labour Party conference motions. So, for instance, the Labour in 2022 in Liverpool, you'll probably remember the backdrop of Labour's conference was a fairer, greener future. The motion of that conference was the climate crisis motion. Now, I proposed that motion on the conference floor. About 70% of the motion that we compensated with CLPs and trade unions that will actually got passed on the conference floor was what we put in initially. So, a significant amount of impact there, we think. And that led on to it works alongside and informs the National Policy Forum process as well. So, in terms of how did we influence what was actually in the manifesto, it was our work that got Labour to commit to no new oil and gas licenses, for instance. That was our words and both in conference motions, but also in our amendments to the National Policy Forum. Also, it was through our words that Labour committed in its election manifesto. The first time as Labour's committed in any of its own written documents, it wasn't in the 2017 or the 2019 manifestos, for instance, that Labour's committed that its policies will align with what's called the Paris 1.5 climate goal, which is what climate scientists tell us we will need to stop average global pre-industrial level temperatures rising above 1.5 degrees more than the pre-industrial era, if we want to avert catastrophic climate change. Now, so that's how we influence through the policy making process, but we also influence through the campaigning process as well, which we'll probably come on to.
Okay, this is what I love, by the way. Like, I think for members who are listening who aren't so aware of this side of the Labour Party, they might be aware of their own CLPs, they might be aware of their own membership and the people in their areas or wards or whatever. But this is how a party like the Labour Party actually makes a difference to the whole country, doesn't it? Because it's about policy formation that will actually really make a difference when we win power. And that's what happened this year, isn't it? The things that we've been proposing for years now are actually going to be enacted by the Labour government. That's quite exciting to see how that all comes together.
Absolutely. And by the way, you just reminded me because you mentioned CLPs. We have individual members, but CLPs can affiliate to SERA too. So if you want to do that with your CLP, we're more than happy for your CLP to affiliate to us. But yes, this is how, unlike the Conservative Party, for instance, we are a democratic party. Members have a say in the policy development process, both through conference and the national policy forum process. So, ideas we put on the ground. So I've only referred to when we were talking just now about what we've done in this cycle. But for instance, the idea we proposed that local communities should get uh, a payback, if you like, for allowing renewable energy infrastructure to be erected, whether it be turbines or wind farms. Should back in 2009, 2010, or it was us and working in partnership with the Co-op Party who actually proposed that back then. So it's taken 14, 15 years to it was in Labour's manifesto, and it's going to be I think one of the areas of where we will show to people and communities that they, in return for getting some infrastructure, which not everyone always looks too kindly on. If you do it, not only will it help reduce energy bills and help, we hope, avert the worst impacts of the climate crisis, but there'll be a payback for the community that you live in too. So that's another example. Again, we worked on clean air. Labour's manifesto included a commitment to a clean air impact. That's a campaign that we ran in 2015, 2016. One of the new MPs who was very involved in that campaign, he thought it was a huge issue in his North London constituency, was one Keir Starmer.
Never heard of him.
So again, so our involvement in campaigning, policy development process, that's how we influence what Labour's going to do in government, in the run-up to government, but also the policy development process will inevitably evolve during hopefully the next 4 or 5 years and longer of the Labour government. And, we, just like CLPs, will be able to put forward ideas that we hope and believe should come through and end up being government policy.
Yeah, amazing. So, okay, I remember in the 90s at school, I remember seeing videos about climate change, although it's called, what was it called, global warming back then. And I remember clearly, like, other students just not really caring. And this teacher said to us, if you want to stay back afterwards and carry on watching the documentary, you can. And I was the only sad loser who did that rather than go out and eat some chips. But anyway, so I did stay in the room and I kept watching it. And then I kind of realized in the early noughties, it seemed to me, and I could be wrong, it's just my own interpretation of this, that because we had things like Al Gore's documentary and kind of, the real, I think, shake up about the worries about what's going to happen with climate change and the climate emergency, it seemed like a lot of people almost said it's too late. And they thought, where's the agency in that? You need to feel like there's going to be hope. It has to be based on agency that you can make a difference in some way. And to say that you can't do anything seems, totally like it's just a really depressing situation to be in. So do you find that as part of your campaign to trying to highlight how we can make changes in our lives as not just government policy, but we could do as individuals to really make a difference?
Well, yes, we can, but actually, the biggest difference we make is collectively coming together and change government policy. It's great that if people reduce their waste and reduce their recycling, but it's much better if government policy says you've got to reduce your waste or recycling, and the government will take steps to ensure that happens. You need that collective action, at a societal level, at a country level, at a regional level, or a city level, and makes far more difference than we as individuals can make just in making sure we do our recycling. We move from a a a petrol or diesel car to an electric car, or even to walking and cycling. Those are all great things, and actually the benefits of walking and cycling, as well as reducing pollution and reducing congestion, well, climate change, greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. The benefits are also the health benefits as well. So yes, we can and we should do individual things, and we can really notice the difference in our everyday lives. But actually, it's the collective voice we bring together to say we want governments to change policy. It'll be the government phasing out the Labour saying no, there will be no new oil and gas licenses will have the biggest impact on climate
Yes.
emissions
Yeah.
over the next 10 or 15 years in the UK, for instance. We
Yeah.
need to take similar steps, as we decarbonise our energy system, how we look at our farming and our transport sectors as well. And those have to be driven by government. They can't all be driven by individual action. We know that markets do fail, and governments, that's the difference between us and the Conservatives. We recognise market failure, and that it's right and it's legitimate for government to step in and shape markets, particularly when they don't factor in what economists call externalities, which is
Yeah.
things like climate change and air pollution.
Yeah, yeah. But then I think the challenge you have, because I used to be a history teacher, so I remember teaching about the 1858 pollution of the Thames, of the sewage, and then how an act was passed to clean up the sewage after that. But there was something very much like a tangible experience of pollution that people were obviously aware of. And of course, smog in the 1950s and 40s, people were very aware of that as well. The ULEZ and the air pollution issue, we know statistically how dangerous that is, and children have died, haven't they, and had really bad asthma from air pollution. But a lot of people don't experience it in the same way, and so they might be resistant to change. And I wonder sometimes, how do you try to bring people along board to realise that it's not just about avoiding a crisis, but also positive change in their lives to support how we should become greener? Because like Ed Miliband said, we're not in the hair shirt business. We're trying to make the life better business. And it's like, how do you bring people along with you? That's always a challenge in green issues, isn't it?
Yeah, so we are, and I think there's part of you've got to have a carrot approach as well as a stick. You've got to have a positive as well as a negative. But let's not ignore the negatives, because they are there and they are huge. But that's what, when we talk about air pollution, we talk, the benefits are exercise, and the fact that you and your family and your friends and people in your community won't get sick and ill as much. Now, sometimes people think it's quite hidden, but if we look most recently during COVID, I mean, I live in the London Borough of Newham, and we had one of the highest rates of people who died from COVID, and a disproportionate amount of those were people with underlying health conditions caused by air pollution, for instance.
Yeah.
People who had lung and respiratory diseases. Those are the people who were more susceptible to dying from COVID. So people saw that. We don't want that to be something that, as an example, we have to cite, but it's clear. But on a more positive level, we know with the investment we're going to have to make in our transforming our energy system, for instance, huge amounts of infrastructure. We're going to move to what is called let me get, I was going to say disaggregated, a dispersed electricity model, because we're going to move to more renewable, sustainable energy. Those aren't next to big coal mines or where pipelines come in from oil and gas fields. This is going to be energy generated everywhere, and we're going to need a different infrastructure. That will cost money, but also, that infrastructure that we put in place will then help bring about cheaper bills for everyone. So that is, because no one owns the sun, no one owns the wind. The markups that we should be getting, the companies should get, they should be allowed to have a fair price and a fair return, but it's not going to be the levels that you need for oil and gas, where actually the amount of money it takes to get them out of the ground, drilling under the North Sea, for instance, is huge. So it does hold the prospect of cheaper and more secure energy, because we're not going to be reliant on dictators like Putin or other non-democratic states who now disproportionately do have the oil and gas, and to a lesser extent coal resources that we've already exploited. That's what we were the first country to industrialize in the UK. We've exploited a lot of that. But as we move to renewables, there's a real reason to do it. That we've got wind. We've got. I think it's the second greatest offshore wind potential outside of China in the world. That's why we've got such
Wow.
potential in wind. But it should be and will be more secure and cheaper.
Yeah.
So that's a positive from people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm reading at the moment "Disorder" by Professor Helen Thompson from Cambridge, and it's a very intense book. I'm going my way through it slowly. Started this week, but she just describes exactly what you said about security, which I think has probably changed the debate for a lot of people. I think, especially kind of post kind of the Ukraine war and what's been going on. Well, it's still going on now, obviously, but I think a lot of people are becoming much more aware of that, where they weren't before. And I think this reliance on cheap energy from some kind of dictators has been a real kind of, I think it's been flagged up now to be quite a weak point in our economy, and actually how we think everything's going absolutely fine, but if they decide to turn off the taps, what do you do? And actually having your own source of energy is great. I mean, what about nuclear in that picture though? Because I mean, obviously renewable is essential. Where do you think nuclear fits into that story?
Well, listen, I mean, the quickest and cheapest way to decarbonize our energy system is moving to renewables and also energy efficiency. That's the other side of the coin. Making we've got the worst energy efficient housing stock in Western Europe. The Conservatives abandoned Labour's plans to improve to increase energy efficient levels in new homes, which meant we've built, I think, over 1 million
And
homes.
water efficiency, right? And water
Well,
efficiency too.
well, we'll come to water efficiency, but energy efficiency is is,
Yeah.
is part of it. And so that is the quickest and cheapest way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to increase energy security, and reduce people's bills. And a huge part of this is, it's by reducing the cost of energy and improving energy efficiency, we can help tackle um, the cost of living crisis, and in particular fuel poverty. So there's a big issue at the moment about what we're going to do with winter fuel payment allowances.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a legitimate issue of concern, and I'm not going to get into that now. But in the medium to long term, what we want to be getting to a position where we don't have to pay people winter fuel allowances, because we've got much cheaper energy and much more energy efficient homes, and they aren't reliant upon it. We give that to people to tackle fuel poverty. If we can end fuel poverty, and I believe renewables is the best, and energy efficient is the best way to do that, then not only does it make environmental sense, but it makes economic sense. It also makes sense on social, for those of us who care about social justice as well, which is why we're in the Labour Party and not in some other parties. In terms of, you talked about water, you brought up the issue of water, yeah, and we led a big campaign on water pollution during the general election, which we'll come back to. And part of it is about water pollution, but also it's about water security. We haven't built a reservoir in the UK since 1992, which we built millions of new homes in different places, and the energy support, sorry, the water supply hasn't been increased to support that. So part of what we need to do is build more reservoirs, but also what we do, we need to look seriously about the amount of water our homes use as well. In countries like France and the Netherlands, we're not talking countries a million miles away. They are literally, in the case of France, 25 minutes over the channel. They have much higher standards in terms of maximum levels of water that homes are allowed to use, and the builders build the homes to support that. So you're absolutely right. If we're gonna, we need to look at as well as looking at water supply, we'll need to look at water use. And if we get homes right, so that we don't need to reduce water, not only will we save demand on water, but we will save people money as well.
Yeah, definitely. You know what? This is where I think is real hopeful because I know here in Cambridgeshire, where I am, we do have a water crisis already. Chalk streams are running dry, and there's lots and lots of development here. I mean, Gove announced before the election about is there 150,000 homes being built here, and the first question everyone had was, well, where's the water going to come from? Because reservoirs take a long time to build, don't they? They're not going to be an overnight thing, and yet the housing will come quite quickly. So I remember like people talking about grey water being used in households. There's all these things where you can reuse water and collect water, which just makes sense. I mean, you don't need to flush beautiful, clean tap water down the toilet, do you? And it's those sorts of things that make sense. But this is where I think the hope comes in. I feel like the Labour message now, and I hope, I guess SERA is a big part of this, is working with the private sector as well to make it a long-term investment rather than I think this short-termism we've had where the Tories have just cut things all the time to try and get quick building or whatever without thinking about this long-term investment working with the private sector.
Absolutely. So again, this is about how government. So it'll be for the government, just like to change energy efficiency standards. It'll be the government that has to pass legislation to change water efficiency standards. So and that is something we will be engaging with the Labour, I was going to say the local government team and planning teams, in Angela Rayner's department, as well as the DEFRA team. They're the two key departments of this. That's a debate and discussion we want to have with them, is about how we improve the quality of our housing stock, not just on energy efficiency, but on water use as well. And good companies will want to do that. And I mean, there are good companies who see the sense in this. There may be some companies who don't really care about it. They're just interested in making a quick buck. And obviously, those are not the people that we think we should be working with.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So I think we mentioned it, and I want to come on to this. The general election campaign. I was kind of struck by how I saw SERA doing a great job with Feargal Sharkey, traveling around the country with our parliamentary candidates, talking about, I think in particular, like you just said, the water cleanliness issue and the issues we have in our rivers and streams. Can I just start on that really firstly by asking, is this a new problem, the pollution in rivers? Is it a problem that we're just more aware of at the moment? Or is it something that's actually been, precipitated in the last 14 years of the Tories and their free market principles?
I would say a bit of all of them. And I mean, so if I just give the background, so first of all, Feargal Sharkey is our president. He's a Labour Party member. He's a trade unionist, and he's an active environmentalist. In particular, water pollution. Feargal got into this because he's a very keen fisherman, and he noticed the state of the river where he fished, and got very angry and upset about it, and said someone should do something about this. So,
and boy, did he, because he's been everywhere. I've not.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of an activist, he has been turning up to different parliamentary candidate campaigns in their areas. He's on the TV. He's done a fantastic job the last few months. So he's been everywhere on this issue, hasn't he? It's been incredible.
Yeah. So we approached Feargal last year about becoming our president, and he said he would be honoured to. I mean, water pollution and the state of water supply is his main focus, but he's also a committed environmentalist and cares passionately about climate change and the impact. He sees the direct connection between climate change and the rivers and streams he wants to fish in, and wants his children and grandchildren and great grandchildren to fish in, and those of other people too. So when we spoke to him and he said he would be delighted to be our president, he also said, but I'm only going to do it if you're serious about this and I want to get out campaigning, which is, as you can imagine, was music to our ears
Yeah,
because
perfect.
that's part of what we're, because Feargal, as well as being a huge environmentalist, he's a great communicator. You know, he's been on in front of a mic for nearly 50 years. Well, say, for over 40 years. You'll get upset if I say 50 years. Uh, um, but and also people don't understand. You know, Feargal after his music career had a business career. He ran record companies. Then he ran the UK music industry itself. So he understands how business works, how good businesses work. He's got no problem with businesses having a good rate of return for doing a job well.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, he's been a regulator. He was the regulator of the UK radio industry appointed by a Labour government. So he knows what the powers of regulators are and what good regulators do and what good regulators don't do. So he knows the difference. Between good and bad regulators. The ones who use the power on behalf of the people they're supposed to represent to regulate industries to make sure that the industries are well run, that the organisations and companies they're working, are sustainable, both in financial terms, but also the industry and how it works itself, but also that the people who use the citizens who depend on those industries who use them also are protected as well. And so, in terms of when we looked at campaign, we also decided 2 years ago that we would, over 2 years ago, that we would seek to have the largest ever number of Labour candidates with strong environment and climate credentials, ideally under, helping to win a Labour election, Labour government. Um, so Feargal agreed to campaign because of other commitments. We basically did most of the campaigning the last 3 weeks of the campaign. But we did, let me get this right. I think we visited 64 constituencies in 14 days
Wow. Wow, that's amazing.
across the country. We held, and also many of them are members, but not all of them. Where we had nearby seats where people who weren't SERA members, but were in what we call battleground seats, we visited some of them as well. We also visited some non-battleground seats nearby where our members were standing. Then we reached that agreement with the party, and we've ended up with 103 of our members now uh, elected to Parliament. So nearly a quarter of the Labour Party,
Incredible.
the Parliamentary
Brilliant.
Labour Party are our members. And we picked water. We identified water, speaking to Feargal, water pollution, because it's such an obvious problem. Going back to
Yeah.
your opening question, I will, it was a problem. The privatisation of the water industry was done badly. Labour changed regulation in the Labour government, and it was regulated better, I think, before 2010. But if you're asking me now if the water companies weren't private, would we seek to privatise them? That'd be an interesting question. I think it'd be an interesting debate. I'm not sure we would, but it also what would particularly under the Conservatives, light touch regulation, the changing of we believe the regulators were actively encouraged not to take the action they should have done. And these are both the environmental regulators and the economic regulators. You've got to remember, in the water industry, there's two regulators. There's Ofwat, which covers is the amount of the economics of the industry and the cost we pay in our water rates. And that covers England and Wales. And then in England, the Environment Agency, which is the environment regulation for things like pollution and other impacts. In Wales and in Scotland, there are separate environment regulators
Do they work
and
together, by the
also
way?
they should be working together. That's one of the questions. I'm sure we're talking to the DEFRA team about how they can work together. In Scotland, both the economic regulator and the environment regulator is run by the Scottish government. In Wales, the environment regulator is accountable to the Welsh government, but the economic regulator is accountable to the UK government. Um, but yeah, we just think there's been terrible regulation, terrible little or no enforcement, and we've seen that. I think the figures are, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure you can look this up. Since privatisation, the water companies have taken out 58 billion pounds worth of dividends for their shareholders, but they've also loaded 65 billion pounds worth of debt onto the
That's
companies
so wrong, isn't it?
themselves.
Yeah.
So what you're finding is, anywhere between 10 and 30% of people's water rates are going to pay the interests on the debts that the owners, the privatised owners of the water companies have loaded on them. When all the water companies were privatised, they were debt free.
Yeah, yeah. So they treat it almost like a bank account, take out a loan
Yeah.
from it almost. Yeah.
Well, that's your description of it, but I don't think you'd find, I would be arguing with that, and I don't think you'd find many of the people who would argue with that. So, in terms of what's, the problem certainly got worse over the last 14 years, and it's going to be one of the challenges, both about water supply. So, where are we going to get our water from? So, water usage, we've got to fix the leaks, because they didn't invest in maintenance and infrastructure. That's why we've got so many leaks. Also, they haven't built enough reservoirs, so we're not supplying enough water. Probably we need to look at, I think, how much water homes use, and that's nothing to be afraid of. As I say, other countries where we see their living standards much higher than ours have regulations in place about how much water they can use, and that's cheaper for the people if you live in a home with more efficient water, water usage built into it, then that's cheaper for you. It doesn't materially impact on your everyday life. You're not going to run
Yeah.
out of water.
Exactly.
So that's part, but also the pollution and the fact that what we've seen. It's really come in the last 4 or 5 years. We've seen the impact of the failure to invest in the water industry by the water industry, the water companies, in pollution, and that's pollution of our rivers and pollution of our oceans and our seas. We've seen that on beach. These are ruining people's lives. They're ruining local economies. In the
Yep.
places we went to, places like Margate or Whitstable or across Cornwall, where beaches are closed
Yeah,
because
Polly
they
Billington
cut.
told me that exact point about the sewage in the sewage is in the sea. There is destroying the tourist industry because why would you
Yeah,
want to be on a beach with sewage? Why would
yeah,
you?
people just aren't going. So, I spoke earlier this year before the election to a surfing instructor from Scarborough who'd built up his business, I think, for about 20 years. But it had closed his business. He'd lost his livelihood because the pollution levels were so high. People wouldn't surf in the water, and he didn't want them to surf in the water because it was dangerous. So
Yeah,
there's a real economic cost, but also it's not just an economic. It's people love to be able to enjoy our rivers on our beaches, and if you can't enjoy them, you can't. We're in East Anglia in Norfolk, and I spoke to a grandfather who had his children there by the beach. He'd grown up by the beach. They lived by the. He said when he was a child, he used to swim in the sea every day, but he wouldn't let his grandchildren go in the water because that has a real impact on people's quality of life. Now,
yeah,
that is the challenge facing us. This is built up over such a period of time. Labour is not going to solve this overnight. It's going to be a long journey back, but we've got to step that journey back now. We're engaging with Steve Reed and the Shadow DEFRA team about what we think they need to do to start that rehabilitation of both our water supply, but also our water quality as well.
Yeah.
Uh,
Now, let's
and
go back to
that's
that for a second, because that's a
sure.
really important point, right? The speed of change is one, I think, the biggest challenges the Labour government's going to face in all areas of the missions, because actually, change itself is a hard thing to bring about through policy, and it's going to take a while to filter through the system. But actually, we are facing, in some cases like this one, a crisis we have to act on really, really quickly. How fast do you think this could be, and how do you kind of make sure people who are really chomping at the bit to get this done are not getting frustrated? And I'm not saying you are actually in the DEFRA team running things. You're not Daniel Zeichner or Steve Reed, but I mean, how do you think that they're going to do that, but to really make sure we get this done as quick as we can and not let those frustrations boil over?
Well, I think we've got a role to play in that, and partly we act as a bit of a transmission mechanism for Labour Party members, many of whom, whether they see themselves as environmentalists or not, care about the water quality and water supply passionately, as do our member MPs as well, and our members who are councillors, who are MSPs, who are assembly members. So it's great that there's a water bill in the first King's speech under the Labour government. We'll be seeking to work with Steve Reed and the DEFRA team to make sure the measures that are in that bill are adequate to start the change that we think we need to make. I think people understand that things aren't going to change overnight, but what we do have to give people confidence is that we understand uh, the seriousness of this issue, uh, the measures that will need to be put in place, and we are starting that journey now. And now what the water bill that becomes the Water Act under a Labour government contains the measures that will make a real difference. And that's bills evolve during their process. So there's good stuff in the bill. We'll be working, as others will be, to try and make it better, so that we
Yeah.
can meet the aspirations of the people who elected Labour MPs, whether we campaign for them or not. I think the polling said that we saw, I have to get this right, but it's like 59% of people said their vote was going to be affected by parties' attitude towards pollution. We believe that we convinced a number of those people to vote for Labour MPs around the country through the campaigning effort that we did. That was the feedback that we got on the doorstep. It was the feedback we got from candidates who, whether they got elected or not. We know that our MPs who got elected understand how important this issue is for many of their constituents on their everyday quality of life. You mentioned Polly, but other people too. Yeah, there's no doubt in seats around the country, seats which Labour won from the Conservatives, whether they were battleground seats or not, water pollution was a significant factor. And we've got a responsibility as a party in government now to start the journey to clean up our beaches, reduce the price gouging that happened under the Conservatives, get a sustainable model, economic model for our water industry, but also a sustainable pollution and water quality model that builds up. The economic model we think can be delivered quicker than the pollution, because water pollution takes many years to address. But if people know we're starting to put in place the steps we need to take, I think they will have confidence, and that is the challenge that we're looking forward to working with Steve Reed, and the DEFRA team, and also not just this is not just an issue in England. It's an issue with our members in the Welsh Parliament and in the Scottish Parliament. We've got no doubt that water pollution will be an issue in both the Welsh and the Scottish elections in 2026.
For sure, for sure. Now, we come to that part of the show, Ken, where we're going to ask the same questions I asked to all my guests, and this is to get to know you a little bit better, okay? So, the first question, I think, is sometimes the shortest questions can make the longest answers. Let's see. Why are you Labour?
If I was going to give a two-word answer, it would be Margaret Thatcher. You know,
Ooh.
uh, or actually, if I want to be more positive, Neil Kinnock. So I grew up in inner city Liverpool in the 1970s and the early 1980s. I saw the impact of a Conservative government who didn't care about the city I lived in and the people who lived in it. I'm of a my parents were of the generation who were both taxpayers when the welfare state was created, and they spent their lives contributing to it. My father was a soldier for nearly 20 years as well, and yet they were looking forward to a their retirement in really poor circumstances in a way they wouldn't have imagined. After paying their national insurance and paying their dues and paying for the NHS and all the other great things the post 1945 Labour government created. So yeah, it's that sense of this is wrong, that people need to work together to deliver a better outcome. There's no point in getting frustrated. And the best way to do that is by joining the Labour Party. I mean, the Labour Party and not some other part of far left parties, because I understand that you need to convince people and engage people who don't necessarily agree with you and bring them on the way. And there's a role for the private sector in our country and in our economy. I think I tend to agree more with that. I think it was which former French prime minister said, I believe in a market economy, not a market society, which I think
Yeah.
reasonably sums up my approach. And why, and people, particularly now, I came to the view about 10, 12 years ago. I had a bit of an environment background. I think I said earlier, I was a Labour's environment advisor before the 97 election. I helped Labour write Labour's manifesto, and so it was me that got the South. For those of you watching in Brighton or Sussex, I got into the manifesto that the South Downs should be the UK's newest national park, and which
Oh,
made
okay.
quite a difference. So, but actually, I came to the conclusion more and more after around 2009, 2010, the climate change was the biggest single issue facing the planet and its people. I come from environment and climate because I care about people. I'm not actually particularly a big naturalist myself, and I'm not a scientist, but I care about the quality of life of people living their life. And that's, if you like, the read across with the Labour Party. If you care about people, you've got to care about the planet. But I know that if you want to make a difference, you've got to bring people with you. I have a sense of urgency and anger about the climate crisis in particular, but also I care about people's quality of life, not just their environmental quality, but their economic quality of life and their social quality of life. So, for instance, I spent a lot of time in the moment. I'm focused on the just transition, or for the people, there will be jobs that will go as we do the energy transition. How do we help people in those communities during that transition? Uh, and that's why that's why I'm in the Labour Party, for instance, not the Green Party. And I think Labour values align with the values of people who care about our planet and care about our nature as well.
Excellent answer. Right, next one then. We're going to put together a fantasy cabinet to kind of shadow a better shadow cabinet alongside our actual Labour cabinet right now. If you could choose any individual, living or not so living, from the past or future, or well, not future, the present, who would you choose and why?
Oh, that is a tough one. I think you've got to be a team player if you're in cabinet. Uh, you've also got to be able to inspire as well. You've got to be able to come up with ideas. I think creativity is really important. If you're people can be really good ministers and help deliver systems if they're not the most creative. But I do think you want creativity. You want uh, someone who inspires leadership, someone who understands collective responsibility, and that team delivers more than any one individual can, which is a very Labour value. And so my choice, who I also know happens to be free at the moment, is Jurgen Klopp, the
Right.
ex-Liverpool
Okay.
manager.
Yeah. Excellent.
So and I think Jürgen's values could quite easily be Labour values. I'm not sure whether Keir Starmer would be able to afford it, but might be worth an approach. And I think
There
he
might
would
be
do
calls
well in
happening
those.
right now.
Yeah.
Klopp, are you free, mate? You're in. Okay, what's your best day in politics?
So I'm going to. So I said I used to be head of media and politics for a community union, which represents people in a lot of industries, but primarily the steel industry, where most people will know it for. And my best day would be probably in. I can't remember exactly I have to look up the date, but it was in 2007, at the end of a 5-year campaign to help some of our members. Steel Works uh, be, uh, went into insolvency, and people were losing their jobs. They didn't realise, or we didn't realise, and it turned out the government didn't realise, is that as well as losing their jobs, they were all looking at losing up to 90% of the pensions they paid for. Some of them literally days short of retirement.
That's
So
awful.
we discovered it wasn't just our members who were impacted by that, but actually there was 140,000 people who did in what's called a final salary scheme, who when the employer it's underwritten by the employer, and if the employer becomes insolvent, then the scheme actually becomes insolvent too. Now we discovered that the conservative Margaret Thatcher's government actually should have implemented a European directive to protect people in the event of the employer becoming insolvent. So exactly the circumstances our members found themselves in. So we started a campaign, and it was against a Labour government. This was a surprise to them. If the Conservative government had done what they should have done, then this wouldn't have been an issue. And it took 5 years. It took 4 pension acts. We also took the then UK Labour government to the European Court of Justice and won. And we got, it was the biggest ever settlement, I think, at that time on behalf that a British trade union won. It wasn't just our members, say it was a benefit of 140,000 people, but at all, by the nature of taking this campaign and starting this campaign and running, we also got the then Labour government to bring in the measures to protect people's pensions. But in 2007, in the summer of 2007, I got a phone call from the then Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Peter Haynes' office, saying that they wanted to settle this, and that they would put the money up to make an equivalent of the body that had been created, so that 90% of people's pensions were protected. So we took this. We had 4 or 5 members who were the key of this. One of whom, we took the legal action on behalf of, and I got to phone them and tell them that they got their pensions back. Because I get quite emotional about this, but
Yeah, this is changing lives, isn't it? That is that is really like saying your values is one thing, but this is values in action, changing lives of people.
oh yeah, no, absolutely, and that was, it was great. It shows the solidarity. It was a Labour affiliated trade union. The fact that the union put the money up for this because that's what the members pay their subs for.
Yeah.
We had a difference with the then Labour government. It wasn't their fault, but we didn't think they were going far enough to solve
Yeah.
it. And our first responsibility was for our members. But through engagement with a Labour government, I don't believe for a second we would have got that settlement under a Conservative government, for instance.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got that, and the day that the night that I was able to phone people up and tell them, people said to me, some of my friends said, "So how much of that 12 billion did you get?" And I said, "Not a penny." But you cannot put a price on the conversations I was able to have with people.
That's really choked you up, hasn't it? Isn't that beautiful? I love that. Absolutely love that story, mate. Okay, The next one I've got for you then is a music-based question. So, Desert Island Discs, Radio 4 gets in touch. The producers are saying, we need you to come on the show, Ken, and talk about your best. Well, in fact, you got to just choose one now. What song would you take with you if you had to just choose one song?
Well, this one, you're going to say, oh, as soon as I tell you, you're going to go, God, I know you're going to say that. So
Spice
obvious.
Girls.
Close. But no, but the reality is, I'm going to choose this because it is one of my favourite pop songs. I think it's probably the best pop song ever written. But also, it was, a backdrop to the campaign that we fought this year with Feargal Sharkey. Now, Feargal's not a singer anymore. He's quite adamant that he's not a singer, and I've never asked him to sing. And if anyone does, he won't. However, it is Teenage Kicks, which is the best.
Yeah, it's a superb song.
I think I'd have to check. I think it's like 2 minutes and 49 seconds. But I defy anyone not to dance to Teenage Kicks.
Yeah. Superb. I mean, it'd be awkward if you had said Spice Girls and then you bumped into Feargal and you're like, I'm so sorry, Zigga Zigga got it. So I appreciate you have to do that. No, but I do agree with you. Undertones, superb band. Feargal did a superb job as a singer. I heard it on the radio today, actually, and I was like, oh, I love this song. It's also, it's not dated. I was surprised when I learned years and years ago that it was from the late 70s. I thought it was the 90s song because it hasn't aged, has it?
I'd say, listen, you put that on the radio now. Kids 10 below or up, but teenagers, 20-somethings, they'll start dancing. How many tracks can have that capacity? It is timeless, in that sense. And Feargal probably would have questioned my music taste if I'd chosen the Spice Girls. But he wouldn't be. I think he'll be if he sees this, and I'll make sure he sees it. He will probably be quite surprised that I've chosen that. But it's just such a great song. It's always been on my top 10 or is it 8, whatever we say, or you have on Desert Island Discs, as we all do it. What would we do? But particularly now, even more so. It goes through my head when I think about the campaign that we ran, which helped us get 103 members of Parliament, Labour members of Parliament elected.
Yeah, and it's actually as well, like that is a once, potentially twice maximum in your lifetime experience. It's that special, isn't it, to know you've been part of that campaign and you've actually brought about change. And whatever change happens in the future, you're at the beginning where that happened. You're at the point where it made the difference. You were there, and that's really special.
Well, but actually, we've got more campaigns to fight in 2026 in Wales and Scotland. We've got local elections to fight next year, and I think we need more. We need more Labour MPs next time, not less, and we need to keep as many, at least, of our members who are elected in government. This turning around this country after 14 years of Tory misrule is not going to happen overnight. As Keir Starmer says, we're going to need at least 2 terms, I think more, not just to right the wrongs, but to make it a better country for people to live in. And that includes the environment. I want people to be proud of the country they live in and think on environment as part of the Great Britain. We've got a great environment, we've got great beaches, we've got great air quality, and that's part of the Great Britain that they want to bring their families up in.
There you go. Now, that is the answer of a chair of a Labour Associated Society. Exactly what I'd expect. That the fight goes on, the campaigns go on. Change is not something that just happens. It's a continual process you have to keep fighting for every single day. Well, Ken, I've really enjoyed this conversation today. Thank you so much for coming on, explaining the work of SERA. And I'll put a link in the show notes. So if anyone wants to go to your website to join up, I'll recommend that they do so. Is there any other sort of resources you have for anyone to look at, or is the website the best place?
And we're going over there at the moment, so there's only a few pages up there. We're doing a bit of a rebrand and a bit of a clean up, so there's not a huge amount there. But and for anyone, people call SERA, but actually, we're just Labour's environment campaign. And when people ask you what you've just signed up to join, which I'm sure you will be doing as well, Dan, once you finish this interview, then you can say, I've just joined Labour's environment campaign, Labour's affiliated environment campaign, because I want to help a Labour government improve the quality of life for the people, including our environment.
Have you ever had a podcast affiliate to a to organisation before, or any individuals and CLPs?
If you're saying that you want to donate money to us via your podcast fund, we'll find a way to get there. That's not a problem. I'm sure I will speak to our treasurer, and she'd be more than happy for us to take your money in whichever way, shape, or form you, as a UK taxpayer, want to help us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Ken. Look forward to seeing you at conference, and keep up the good work, mate.
Okay, cheers.
This wound, this lack of trust, can only be healed by actions, not words. I know that. But we can make a start today with the simple acknowledgement that public service is a privilege, and that your government should treat every single person in this country with respect.